Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome all the DPs, FSDOs, FSDO reps and guests. So let's go ahead and get started. Our agenda for today is going to be, come on up here. There we go. Any comments from the last meeting, DMS issues, aircraft documents, airworthiness. We're going to talk about maintenance logs, Form 337s and STCs. And Ernie, are you out there?
I've been told I am.
There you are. Okay, good deal. Ernie's going to cover some of that stuff for us. We're going to talk a little bit about aerodynamics, a portion of the check rise that doesn't seem to be getting tested or evaluated very much anymore because it's only really mentioned one place in the performance and limitations section. We're talking about some stall stuff and some things that we know. Something just happened over there in California again with a Learjet trying to do a circling approach that brought up this topic again. Some scenarios of best practices, point of contact reports, and just they bring up again the airplane flying handbook revisions that came out. We mentioned those at the last meeting in December. So any comments from the last meeting? Oh, any DMS issues? Now I'll be light on that, but Craig, are you out there?
Yes, I am, Phil.
Great. Anyone have any DMS issues? Okay, we'll move along there.
Awesome.
So first thing we're going to talk about here is aircraft documents. This came up, this actually has come up a few times, and I'm going to explain or expound a little bit further on the actual documents in the airplane and what a legal airworthiness certificate should look like, registration, and so on and so forth. We've had some issues where maybe the documents weren't looked at as closely as they should have been, and the condition of some of these documents was not in such good shape. So we're going to chat about that, and then I think Ernie will have a little input on how to replace some of these that we find here. So we're going to refer to the airworthiness certificate, the registration certificate, and the data plate. So here's the data plate. And most of us know that the registrations are good for 3 years, correct? So here we have one. This happens to be my airplane that appears to be good for 12 years.
Did you just say that's a data plate, Phil?
No, I'm sorry. Did I say that? Registration.
Maybe I heard you wrong. Okay, registration. I'm with you.
Yeah, data plate was the last item in that list.
Okay.
So what we have is a confusion with some of the applicants and maybe the instructors as well, that because the registration certificates are good for 36 months, they'll see a date like this where it appears that the registration is good for 12 years. That first date up there is the date that the owner of that aircraft purchased the airplane. That date is always going to be on there. So whatever date, this is in case of myself, this is my 182, and that's when I bought the airplane. But I do get a renewal every 3 years. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that it is still 3 years. It just doesn't reflect the latest. This reflects the latest receipt of the registration, but it appears, it looks like it's 12 years. So what's been happening is some of the applicants have been looking at the registration and doing a little math to see whatever date was on there as the first date, going to whatever it's at and saying 5 years, 6 years, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to bring this up, that's the explanation. That I had somebody ask me why those.
So Phil, I've got a question on that.
Sure.
So you're saying the date of issue will only change when there's a change of ownership. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, that makes sense, because we talked about this a few meetings ago, and I've been paying more attention, to which airplanes are which. And I was even more confused because some of them seem to be the date that the plane was manufactured. But in those cases, it's simply because that's the only owner that has ever had that airplane.
Yeah.
They bought it new and it's still at that owner. So, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
The way it's supposed to work is whatever date that person purchased the airplane. Like, obviously I bought this on November 23rd. Actually, that was the day that I sent the paperwork into the FAA. So that's the date that they they show on the airplane. And as you can see, mine's going to be due this year. So the next one will say November 30th, 2025. But anyway, just so everybody understands that it's still 3 years, always. But it may, if you are doing the math that way.
I'm sorry, Phil, did you say 36 calendar months?
Yes. You know what, Jim?
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
That's okay. If you read the regulation, it's the one time the FAA uses 3 years.
Oh, is it? It actually says it that way. Man, I
Yeah.
thought I had you. One time I thought I had you.
Yeah. And it says, and it expires at the end of the 36th month after it was issued. But part 4740 right there is where that is. And by the way, just so everybody knows, I don't just pull these numbers out from spending all night trying to look this stuff up. This is actually in the PHAC. So that part is listed in the PHAC as a reference for this information. Does anybody have any questions on that? Oh, and bear with me here. Okay. Yeah, somebody had a funny comment about your comment there, Jim. Next thing here, the data plate. This, of course, is mine. This is what they're supposed to look like. It's supposed to be a metal / fireproof plate riveted to the lower left tail of the airplane, or in the case of the Seminole, it's actually underneath because it has a unique tail. You have to crawl up underneath to take a look at it. One of the things that you want to pay attention to is that it can't be a sticker or a decal. So sometimes people will use those label makers. I don't know if you guys remember those Dymo label makers that, made an impression in some plastic strips, or they'll use a decal of some type, but it has to be fireproof. And that's part 4511. So just pay close attention to those. Also on the along these lines right here, if you should happen to run across an airplane, it looks like it was just recently painted. Make sure the pitot tube is not painted. It's not supposed to be painted. There's 1 or 2 floating around out there, out here at Chandler, that have the pitot tubes painted. So they're not supposed to be painted. So does this look like a good airworthiness certificate? Not everybody at once now.
I'll say no.
Okay, that's a good answer. No, it's not. I shouldn't really have to explain why it's not good, but of course I blacked out some of the things I didn't want to identify. I wanted to de-identify this here, but this is actually one from our area here. And you'll notice down on the lower left-hand side, you see what's left of the word replacement. So it was replaced in apparently it's a 1968 model, but this was a replacement. So this isn't even the original one. So this has already been replaced. But these are not valid certificates because a lot of the wording that is supposed to be readable is not on there. So here's another one right here. Not quite as bad, but once again, these are not legitimate. So Ernie, did we find out about the replacement?
Yeah, yes. So you can do replacement. Well, first, the bottom line, you're not going to get it replaced immediately. So if you go out as a DPE and you see this and you don't want to accept the aircraft, the owner's not going to be able to call the FSDO or go online and get that replaced today. So that airplane's done. But as for replacement, there's 2 ways to do replacement. You can do replacement either through the standard method that we've always used, where you fill out the 8610-6, I think it is, the application. You fill that out and you fill out, I think, sections 1, 2, and 3. Then you take that in or mail it in, and then the FSDO will look at your certificate as well as or if it's lost, you need a letter. But you go through that process the way we always have, and then they'll give you a replacement certificate. There's also a portal, AWC portal, and that AWC portal You can do that online. Again, it works the same way. You got to enter all the data they ask for, basically filling out parts 1, 2, and 3 on an 8610 lookalike form, and that goes to the FSDO. It'll take them a couple days to get it, and then it'll take them a couple days to process it, so you're not going to get it replaced. One thing to understand, I know that this rumor was out there for years and years and years, but you can laminate that certificate if you wish. It is not an alteration. In fact, you're protecting it and making it last longer. So you can laminate it if you wish. What I will tell you though, is that laminating it with standard lamination, if you put it in the sun, it makes it 100 times worse. So if you're going to laminate it and have it somewhere where it's going to get sunlight, make sure you get that UV protected laminate and that everything's legible. So those are the ways to do it. And I have several different tutorials that I can send to you guys that will teach you how to use the AWC. We'll tell you where to go. And in fact, there's one on Scottsdale's website, the FSDO website. There's one, let's see, where's the other one come from? Oh, there's another one that comes off the FAA's website. And then there's a YouTube tutorial also on the FAA website, but I have these all documented here. So if you guys want to, you can come look at them. And then I also have the portal itself. One other thing about the portal website is that once you go on, you have to sign up by establishing an account before you can go any further. So that's the airworthiness stuff, or the certificate stuff. It's also the same site and same process you use to get a special flight permit, ferry permit, and that kind of thing. The other thing that we're talking about is alterations. I get calls a couple of times a month concerning alterations or logbooks and the like. Alterations, especially when it comes to avionics, is a really slippery slope. So one of the things that we look at is what's called fit, form, and function. If I can take the old original equipment out and slide the new equipment in without adding a bunch of wires and so on and so forth, it really is a minor, but it has to have a maintenance record entry. One of the things that I have not found out yet is, for instance, one of the issues that we talked about, Marilyn called me and asked me about swapping out. They swapped out a KLN 89B with a Garmin 430, and they did not, they wrote it off or signed it off as a minor alteration, maintenance record entry, and did not provide the manual, the supplemental manual in the POH. So I'm checking into that to see how that is covered, if that, and because my understanding is that it is considered a minor alteration. I wouldn't consider it one, but they do. What about the operating manual? Because obviously a more sophisticated piece of equipment than the old KLN 89B would be. But on alterations, regardless of whether it's major or minor, there's got to be some sort of documentation. So if it's a major alteration, it has to have a 337. Major repairs aren't the same, but major alterations, anytime there's a major alteration, it has to have a 337. And with that 337, it has to have approved data. And that approved data is going to be in the form of an STC or a field approval. So that's something important to look for. Some of the things, if you want to go in and interpret them for yourself, some of the things you can look at is you can go into 14 CFR Part 43 Appendix A, Section A 1 through 4, and it talks about what is considered a major alteration on an aircraft. You can also go into Part 1, and 14 CFR Part 1 will tells you what the definition of a major alteration is, which is an alteration not listed in the aircraft engine or propeller specifications that might appreciably affect weight, balance, structural strength, performance, power plant operation, flight characteristics, or other qualities affecting airworthiness, or is not done in accordance with accepted practices and cannot be done by elementary operations. So what that's telling me is that there's a lot being put on non-airworthiness DPEs, or DPEs don't have airworthiness experience, or A&P. And to that, I would say that as long as you do your due diligence, you've done your job. So if you see something and you see that it's a alteration, and you ask them to show you how this alteration was documented, and they show it to you as a minor alteration, and they did a maintenance record entry, you did your due diligence, you did your job. Unless you know for a fact that has to have a 337. If it's a question, it's now on the mechanic that installed it rather than you. If you're concerned about safety, as always, you just don't take the airplane. So alterations has always been really, really complicated. There's one other area you can go to look at. There's a couple of ACs, 43210A, talks about standard procedures for approval. There's 43132B. You can go in there and you can take a look and see what it shows, but it mostly shows you how to do these, gives you approved data to do alterations. Not a lot on avionics as far as I remember. And then of course you can always make the phone call, and you can always call me or call any of the other airworthiness people and say, hey, look, I found this, and is it an alteration or not? So are there any questions on any of that? Is there other questions concerning maintenance that I can answer for you guys?
You'll notice on there, I put the front and back copy of a Form 337.
Yeah.
And one of the issues is that, as Ernie said, some DPs do have maintenance experience or the A&P rating, and some don't. And what we run into sometimes, which is what we just ran into last week, was the examiners in front of the one that was speaking with Ernie were okay with what was presented to them. But keep in mind that we all don't have, when it comes to airworthiness, which is why you notice I try to cover airworthiness of some type on each one of these, because it's kind of, out of the realm of normal stuff that we just do as pilots, but we are required to verify that we have an airworthy airplane just for us, crawl into it, and a safe airplane. But also we have to keep in mind that just because someone else took the airplane and did a check ride in it does not necessarily mean that that airplane was okay. We have to pay close attention to stuff. And like Ernie says, if you have any doubt, just make a phone call. But one of the things that you'll find on the 337 form there is, I wrote on the back, you'll see if there's any change to weight and balance. And that does become important depending on the type of equipment. Some of these airplanes had one NAVCOM in them, came out of the factory, and then somebody decides to go ahead and put a nice stack of stuff in it. And it will effectively change the weight and balance quite a bit, even though it's close to the firewall normally, which is a lot of times the zero datum line. But if there are any changes, it'll specify that in that form. But many times doesn't necessarily need to be a number. And I don't remember what it is, 2 or 3 pounds maybe, is that it'll say weight and balance change negligible. So what they're saying is that it really doesn't make a difference. One of the big ones was when these new starters came out, the new lightweight starters. They weigh quite a bit less than the old starters did. I mean, quite a bit less. And given the fact that those are on the other side of the datum, that will definitely make a difference on weight and balance, because now you have a lighter front end. But Ernie, along those lines, would that be considered a 337 form for that?
To put in lightweight starter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And the same with the alternators, because they also have the lightweight alternators.
You have a lightweight alternator. If you've changed the alternator, if you've changed, so electricity is something that we're supposed to be checking for whenever we do an alteration. So if we change, and avionics is an excellent example, changing an older radio for a newer radio that has GPS and some other functions to it may not necessarily be a major alteration, because it may be drawing the same, if not less, power than the old system. But when you put a whole stack in, you put a whole stack of stuff in there and you've got the whole center console filled up, you have probably changed the power requirements for the avionics package. And that's going to affect it in the way it's going to be a major alteration, especially if you have to change, if you have to go to a bigger alternator, if you need different shunt systems. There's a lot of things that play into that. So that's important to remember. Electricity, weight and balance, flight characteristics. One thing I can tell you is that if they had to change the antenna and they had to cut to install that antenna and do a doubler, that's a major alteration.
Mhm.
So this is the area that is probably the toughest for almost everybody, FAA inspectors and mechanics alike, as well as pilots. It's just, there's so many different things you can do to an airplane that may or may not be considered a major alteration. But anytime you change the airplane from its original TC, it is an alteration. So it does have to be documented one way or the other.
Right, and I'm not trying to turn everybody into mechanics. I'm just trying to make you aware of, some of these issues right here. And if you have any doubts, just make some phone calls. And unfortunately, some of these aircraft, the people that own them now were not the owners of the aircraft when the changes were made. And sometimes they may not have done enough investigation when they purchased an airplane with all this additional modifications or avionics done to it. And just because it was signed off all these years as being airworthy, like anything else, things slip through the cracks. But just to protect you guys and also to get across to the applicants, especially the owner airplanes, this usually isn't an issue with some of the larger school airplanes because they're pretty standardized along the lines. But that's all we're trying to do here is get you comfortable with what kind of things you could see. I've had airplanes show up for check rides with vortex generators on them and a few other modifications, troop wing tips. And I said, that's kind of unique. And I'm looking through the paperwork for the STC/337 form and I can't find it. And the owner says, oh, I just put those on. I put the little decal or stencil on the wing and I glued them on. Just like the direction center, I just changed wing tips. They can't do that. And that's the reason that I bring this up is you just don't want to crawl into something that appears to be okay, but there's just too many gotchas and we might as well get those taken care of before we even either start the test or before we crawl in it for a purpose of flight.
So on that subject of STCs, have I covered the Frankenplane presentation with you guys? Have we talked about that? We have a presentation called Frankenplane. And basically what it is, it just shows a whole bunch of different accidents with aircrafts that have STCs that are now actually working against other STCs. So if you haven't seen it, let me know and I'd be happy to present it to you guys one day if you want.
Yeah, I think you did present that to us a couple of years ago, maybe when we did our annual training at Quantum, I think, at Chandler. I do remember that, Ernie.
Yeah, I think so. The key one for me was there was a Skymaster, ironically, a Cessna 337, that had 23 STCs on it. And of course, the airplane flew itself apart because of all the different STCs that were actually contradicting other STCs. So yeah, that's pretty important. I would say from your standpoint as a DPE, and I'm not a pilot, so I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but if I was to walk up to an airplane and it had multiple STCs on it, I'd be very weary of flying it if it's not an airplane, you know.
Mm. And like the fuel, a common one was the use of autogas for fuel. That is an STC. So I don't even know if that one's still floating around out there. But as you see right here, anytime you change airframe components or additional avionics, that's the most common one nowadays. The STCs are created by an individual who agrees to develop the STC, do the proving runs that he needs to do for it, and then send the data to the FAA. And at that point, if it's okay, they approve it. And then you're purchasing it from the aircraft owners purchasing it from an individual or company. You're not purchasing through the FAA. But give you an idea what some of these things look like. Here's one that tells you this is a JPI instruments, and it's a JPI digital tachometer. As you see that's an STC. And what will happen is to correlate those two forms, when the STC is installed, it'll be installed in accordance with the STC, whatever that number is. And also, because it is an STC, correct me if I'm wrong, Ernie, but I think 9.5 out of 10 times there's going to be a 337 form associated with it.
Yeah, STCs always have a 337. That's one of the things, it's one, I actually have a query out to the ACO concerning major radio changes. We were discussing with going from the KLN to the Garmin's, because most time you have to have an STC. If that doesn't have if that doesn't have a TCO or a PMA to allow you to install it on an aircraft, you need an STC to do it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're changing that, you also have to be able to tell anyone who asks you, how are you maintaining this? Like, for instance, there's no data card update on a KLN, is there? But the 430s, I think they change the data card every 28 days. So how do you do that? So those are questions that I have out there to them, and as soon as I get an answer, I'll let you know.
Got it. Anyone have any questions on the STC concept? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
Sure.
An applicant shows up for a check ride with a highly modified airplane. Do you, as the examiner, need to see all the STCs for everything installed in that airplane?
That's going to be, I know that, well, Ernie, how long are they required to keep the 337 form? It's only a year except for the fuel tank, is that correct?
No, forever.
Forever, okay.
TCs are kept forever, and that's, so when you go to Oklahoma City looking for records, what you're going to get back to and get back major alterations, and that's basically what the records are, and that's what you have to keep. STCs are kept forever because that tells you how to maintain that alteration. So they should have it. If they don't have it, they can get it from Oklahoma City, but I wouldn't fly the airplane without it.
Right.
My question more pertained to, I'm working with an instrument student right now in a highly modified TR-182, all kinds of stuff on it. I mean, even the sun visors are changed out. You need to see all the STCs for all the installed equipment during the check ride. I mean, normally all that stuff stays at home in his hangar, in his files, records at home.
Well, I'll answer the DPE part of it. Just like anything else, the 100-hour, the annual, a progressive, a transponder cert, I would want to see it before, not during, the flight or anything, but before the check ride. And I have seen some pretty highly modified airplanes, and not knowing they were that highly modified till they showed up. That's why I do a lot of homework anymore about what do you have in your airplane. Even take a picture of the panel, so I have an idea what kind of avionics are installed in it. But once again, the reason I'm doing this is because we have a huge discrepancy between ourselves as well as the school/instructors on what is that thing and how much do I need? And you just asked a valid question. I would ask to see them because I don't know if I'm crawling in something that is as Ernie talked about, the Franken STC, where there might be something we encounter that is something I don't want to be on CNN to deal with. So I would say I would want to see them. The only one you have to carry with you, and I believe this is Ernie, correct me if I'm wrong, is the one that's the fuel tank STC when you have the extra fuel tank. I think that's the only one that has to be carried on board the aircraft at all times, and that's that's your drug smugglers and stuff like that have that extra tank.
If it's a cabin, if the fuel tank is in the cabin, then you have to carry the STC or in open site.
Right.
But
right.
once the fuel tank is removed from the cabin, that's basically a temporary fuel tank. once that's, and a good example, that's when they were ferrying, Senecas across the pond. Put a couple extra fuel tanks in the back and fly all the way to Hawaii with these Senecas. So that, in that case, you have to have the 337 on board the aircraft, but all the other 337s, that's the only requirement for a 337 to be on board. But all the other things that you have done to 337s have to be in the maintenance records. And what's it, like, for those who aren't familiar with the Skymaster issue, the issue was that they had modified the front and back propellers to a 3-bladed system, which brought the top speed up. That brought the top speed up about 40 knots of what it normally is. And then later on, they put tip tanks in, and then they put a stall kit in. And so they have these great big giant wing fences on the end of this Skymaster. They've got now 25 gallons of extra fuel on the outboard portion of the wings. And that STC drops the maximum speed of the Skymaster. And this pilot with 5 people on board was flying about 50 feet above the deck, and the wings just came off. And it was because they oversped the wings. And it had not been changed in the maintenance record to reduce that top speed.
Yeah, so that goes back to the IA who signed off the original modification, not checking for conflicting STCs.
Absolutely, but they'll do a thing for the people that died on the airplane.
And in the case of the pilot part of it, if they're not all there, and I know as the older airplane, the older the airplane gets, the less and less paperwork that seems to follow it around disappears. As Ernie said, you can go to the FAA and get all the history of that airplane since the day it was born. If Form 337s and STCs were documented with the FAA, sometimes you find that something was put on an airplane, a droop wingtip kit or something like that, where the owner didn't think he had to do that, and somewhere it could be 4 or 5 owners back. But then you might have a problem with having something on the airplane that's not actually approved. So,
and that's something we find occasionally as well. One big change that I see a lot is where an owner operator will take and get rid of NiCad batteries and put lead acid batteries in their aircraft. That's a major alteration, and they don't even document it. They just think they're just changing batteries.
mhm. So one of the things Ernie kind of mentioned before is that what it will say on the back of that 337 form, normally it'll be in the STC. There may be continuing airworthiness procedures or inspections for something that's not under normal 100-hour or annual inspection. So sometimes there are STCs where a special inspection procedure or something has to be done because that STC is on board. And you'll see that most of the time written on the back of the Form 337. It'll say for continuing airworthiness, you need to check this, this, or this, and that will be there if there's any weight and balance change for that. So once again, try not to make everybody mechanics, but just trying to let everybody know on both sides of the spectrum here that there's some issues out there that you don't want to expose yourself to if you don't have to. So, because I know there's not a lot covered with this kind of stuff. And just in the past couple of weeks, I've had phone calls with individuals asking, well, this is on the airplane or that's on the airplane. And the owner goes, I got it that way. Well, of course, but at some point it has to be tracked down to see if it's legal or not, or airworthy or not.
Hey, Phil.
Yes.
This is Phil. Josie. Well, on the instructions for continued airworthiness, when it comes to the avionics, they have quite a few. It's not owners, it's turn it on and check this, check that, like you said. Where are you seeing that documented is I don't know that people are actually doing it, but if they are, is the avionics guy doing it and then document it in the maintenance record, or as a pilot, I can do it and then?
It'll say in the documentation, and we talk about this on the last meeting back in November, there are some ADs that actually can be done by a pilot. One of them is the old Bendix ignition switches, where you turn the key to the off position before you shut the airplane down to make sure that the ignition switch is correct and the airplane actually shut down. You were able to ground both mags, but it'll say in the STC, and that's the other part of this, is that there's a lot more information in section 9 of these manuals than people are taught or evaluated on or even aware of, because that chapter 9 in the AFHs and the pilot handbooks, that's where all this stuff is, because they'll say there'll be an airplane flight manual supplement. It'll state that it has to be carried on board the airplane. It doesn't physically have to be in the book. Put it wherever you want. Sometimes they won't fit that way unless you punch holes in it. But it'll state in there in the STC what the continued airworthiness procedure is. And it'll also state in there if a pilot can do it or a mechanic. Normally, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ernie, but I think normally with most of the STCs, it's normally a pilot thing. There's not too much in a way of maintenance. I had a couple on some airplanes that were mechanic things. And once again, they weren't things that were included in the normal inspection. So I had to make the mechanic aware of the fact that I had a continued airworthiness issue with some of the STCs, but it should be in the STC. Is that correct, Ernie? It should be stated in there?
That's correct. In order for a private pilot or above to do any sort of preventive maintenance on the aircraft, it has to either be in an airworthiness directive, stated in the airworthiness directive, or stated in the STC that you're trying to comply with. So like in the STCs for the 430s, for the Garmin 430, 530s, et cetera, Garmin 1000s, it says that person holding a private pilot certificate or above is allowed to change out that data card.
Mm-hmm.
But it will specify if a pilot's allowed to do it.
Yeah, Phil, a really good example that I see in helicopters, and we do it here at Boeing, is when you have a night vision goggles STC, that changes the external and internal lighting and covers some of the instruments with a night vision goggle filter and so on. A really elegant way of doing it is you take the continued airworthiness checks right out of the STC, make photocopies, and our guys insert them within the paperwork for the annual. So as I go through the annual, should we be ramp checked or somebody wants to buy the aircraft, they can see, the annual inspection sheets, and then stapled onto those are all the ICAs for the STCs.
Yep. And I think, Phil, you were asking about a documentation of it. Normally, if there's anything that is continued airworthiness, the documentation would normally be made unless it, if it states in there that you have to do this stuff. Obviously, if a mechanic's doing it, that's done. I know there's a lot of them that aren't done, like the switch. You don't have to make a documentation in the maintenance logbook every time you shut the airplane down 3 times that day that you did that. It doesn't state that. That's just something that's done at the end of each flight. So, but once again, we as examiners and those of you out there as instructors in flight schools, we need to spend a little bit more time on the airworthiness portion of the training, because it is extremely important. Tends to be, you'll see here in a couple slides where we kind of push off the maintenance logs to the applicants a day or two before they're going for the check ride. And they really need to know beforehand, because as soon as they get solo in that airplane, they are responsible and determine the condition of the aircraft is safe for flight, because that instructor is not there anymore. Plus, as an instructor, especially those that would be teaching in owner airplanes, I would make sure that I saw a logbook before I did any lesson in that aircraft the first time. I would make sure that what I crawl it, because if you crawl in there and there's a placard missing, or there's a modification done to the airplane, it's not worth losing a CFI or a pilot certificate over. Take a look at the books before you get started and make sure that you're comfortable with the airplane as well. Any other questions on that? Some examples, we talked about avionics installations, radios, transponder, a stall kit, the vortex generators, flap gap seals. A lot of people will put those on. They're pretty easy to install, but that does require an STC, and it definitely is a modification to the airframe, especially if you're drilling holes in it. And then, of course, nowadays with the JPI and the Electronics International stuff, there's a lot of those instruments that are being put in there. Also, you got to make sure, for those of you dealing with the instruments, you got to make sure that instrument, if you're going to remove the other instrument it's taken the place of, you got to make sure that instrument is approved as a primary instrument. That's not the case all the time. So sometimes you have a fancy electronic version of something, but it's not to be used as the primary instrument. So the original one has to stay in the airplane. Okay. So once again here, try to get the maintenance records logs early in the training for those of you with the schools and instructors, and talk to them about TCDs, 337s, and STCs. Obviously, the TCDs is what the airplane was certified under, and it was issued a number. I think we saw before that the 172s are all like 3A12 is the number for all the models. So give them some more exposure to that. And anyway, they're responsible for determining aircrafts in a safe condition for flight when they're soloing, and a little bit more maybe in scenarios, or for us as examiners, a little bit more than just failing an instrument, but asking them, what would you do if you saw an instrument with droop wingtips, or you saw an airplane with those vortex generators on it? You're flying your friend's airplane, and they need to know that there's a little bit more to it than what they're used to before. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, I've been asked by a couple people to talk a little bit more about aerodynamics. We only see that word one time in the ACS, in the private and commercial, because the examiners really only have to touch on one or two elements of each section. This is only written down in the limitations, performance and limitations section. So I found that as I was doing some of the CFI training in the past couple of years, left turning tendencies was, I think, talked about in a class in their primary training and never brought up again, and had the lack of understanding in that. But some of the things that I think we want to look at, both from a training standpoint, evaluating standpoint, is obviously that stability, dynamic and static stability is obviously Bernoulli's principle, ground effect, and induced drag and parasite drag. These are things that I ran across in the training with the CFIs that had a lack of knowledge in. Okay, something near and dear to my heart, stalls. First of all, Bobby's going to give us a little dissertation on one of the reasons we need to spend a little bit more time on these, but I want to cover one thing. When I ask an applicant what speed, or ask them, where does the airplane stall at? And I try not to say what speed, because that's not what I want to looking for. But there's a standard answer is, well, it's going to stall at the low end of the white arc with the dirty configuration, low end of the green arc, and the clean configuration. We need to get away from the speed concept. And that's part of what's causing some of these airplanes, I think, out there that are running into these situations, is people keep looking at airspeed indicators to see if they're going to be close to a stall. Now that Learjet probably had, I can't remember if that one had an AOA indicator or not in it. The ones I flew did. But that low end of that green and the low end of the white, just for everybody's edification, that's based on a standard day, sea level, gross weight airplane. So level 1G level flight. So basically, it's not really where it's stalling on a normal day when we're doing our maneuvers with the two or three of us, or the two of us in there, or one person in there. So let's take a little bit more, put a little bit more effort into making sure that the applicants understand airplanes stall at any speed, any configuration, any altitude, any everything. And because what happens is, let's see if it's in the next one here. Well, I'll cover these things here, but what's happening is when they're doing the stalls, they're staring at the airspeed indicator. And basically the private and commercial ratings are VFR ratings, and they should be looking out the window and not relying on what the airspeed indicator is saying to determine if the airplane is stalling, approaching a stall. It's something that they're supposed to hear and feel That's what we're looking for, is that they can identify it. The private does a full stall, the commercial does the first indication. So this is what we should be looking for, and you'll find that a lot of them are staring out staring at the airspeed indicator and not looking out the window. So that's bad for two reasons, because they're caught on thinking that it's a speed issue. And then once again, when we get to the accelerated stall, that happens in the commercial maneuver. But there's no reason that instructors cannot do what we call the demonstration stalls, that it's called on a CFI check ride, to a primary student. They can very easily show them the accelerated stall, the secondary stall. Most of the guys end up doing a secondary stall in their own recovery on their own. But the elevator trim stall, cross control stalls, these are all things that I think if we spend a little bit more time demonstrating these at the primary level, they understand that, 45-degree bank, this is what it's going to do. I'm not saying they have to do it, and you're not training them to proficiency at all. What you're doing is showing them that we need to get away from that bottom of the green, bottom of the white is where this airplane's the wing is going to stall at. So we can get better into this, the understanding of this. Hence, one of these situations like what just happened in San Diego. And we had one, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago in Teterboro up there. So we've got to figure out a way to get the knowledge in there sooner than later on these events right here. Bobby, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Hey, just a clarification. You'd mentioned that the private ACS says that the stall has to be taken to the full stall, and it was the one set of the stall to commercial, I believe. They added a change to commercial ACS here a while back that allows the examiner to make that determination, whether it's just the or to the full stall.
Yeah. You want to continue with the other stuff we talked about?
Yeah, so I like what you had to say in our conversation last night. It's, again, teaching to the test, teaching applicants a skill set that simply measures the absolute minimum that the ACS, tends to allow a little bit of, well, it doesn't test it all the time to the complete, it just samples. And I think the context of that was that the scenario would allow the applicant to demonstrate through the areas of operation a more comprehensive view of their knowledge, the risk assessment associated with the skill set, as opposed to, we'll just do this, do this, do this. And if we're just telling them to do this, do this, do this, I think we're missing the whole point, which is sort of an effect of a cause of, doing the check ride at its absolute minimum. Instead of, if you've done a scenario, I think that's proper, you're going to get a much bigger comprehensive view of what the pilot applicant skill set entails. So we've got to be good stewards of that document, as opposed to, well, I can get this done in 0.7 or whatever. When it comes to stalls, though, teaching that correlative aspect of it, understanding the knowledge, understanding the risks associated with that, a lot of this can be done through, I think, as instructors, the training in the slow flight regime and the different maneuvers associated with the slow flight regime, and how the angle of attack changes during that maneuver, and how if you maintain a certain parameter, like a set airspeed, tower, as an example, you're out training slow flight and you're using the scenario, the towers ask you to follow a slower aircraft and then give them, or gives you, a 360-degree turn to follow. It's a great opportunity to show in that change of angle of bank at that fixed airspeed, how the angle of attack is going to increase, and that just any distraction or wake turbulence or turbulence could give you an onset of a buffet, which by that definition is an accelerated situation. Acceleration can be a relative term. If I just honk back on the stick, that's accelerating it, but it's doing it crisply. A change in that configuration is also accelerating the angle of attack to a place where the airplane starts talking to you. So we were just talking about maybe we should be considering that in our scenarios. is to set up in your slow flight. The ACS gives the parameters that the stall speed indicator is not supposed to come on. But if the pilot has trained that recognition and understands the associative concepts, then I think you're going to get a much better pilot's understanding in the way they execute their maneuvers.
Yeah. Any comments on that? One of the things there, you see the second item there, turning stalls. Since most of the people I'm doing some training with are at the CFI level, I'm still amazed at how many, after doing 3 or 4 check rides, have never done a turning stall. The first time they see that is when they're working on their CFI. And I guess for whatever reason, they're not teaching them. Keep in mind that the turning stall, there's a lot of misconceptions about that's how the airplane's going to spin. Of course not. That's not how it spins. Gets into a spin, but they're only asked to do it at 10 or 20 degrees of bank, which is considered a shallow bank. Basically, you let go of an airplane in a shallow bank and it rolls back wings level. Unless the airplane is really out of rig, those stalls should not be an issue. But I think we might want to spend a little bit more time on the stalls, both just not just straight ahead, but turning in both directions. Because now we get into a situation with the left turning tendencies and the P factor and so on and so forth, how the recovery is going to be different from a left bank to a right bank. And I just think we should spend a little more time exposing them to those issues with the airplane. Any other comments on the stalls?
I just posted a question in the chat room, just kind of pure interest, wondering how many of the DPEs attending this forum you actually have people in the private pilot exam do turning stalls. It's in the
Yeah, I see
it's
that.
in the ACS. We can ask for it.
It is. And once again, does anybody want to volunteer whether or not they require those or ask for those?
I do.
I always do at least one. If it goes well, then probably just one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do at least one per check ride.
Yeah, I've done all the ones that I've done were always turning both directions. I would do them in both directions, one left and one right. And hardly ever did anything straight ahead. That the straight ahead it's just so robotic, but I don't think going back to aerodynamics, that's a big part of it. I'm not so sure that, there's enough training being done and evaluating being done and exactly what's going on with that airplane when it's stalling. I'm still amazed at how many don't know how the wing even stalls and why it stalls the way it does. There's very little given to that. It's simply a robotic maneuver that they do to pass the check ride, and then they don't want to see it again until they have to. So anyway, that's up to each person. You can do either way. But anything else? Any other comments on that? Thanks, Karen. Okay, what I want to do on each one of these from now on is we always have best practices and the items to be covered, but we don't really get much out of it. So I'm kind of counting on the group to send me their best practices or scenarios, and they can be de-identified. I mean, obviously I would know who sent them to me, but if you have any best practices or scenarios that you'd like to put out to the group, I would appreciate it. So I can get some input from outside this one office right here. But what I did on this one here is I'm going to try to pick a different area of operation each time and see if we can just throw some information out there to people. But we'll just talk about operations of systems. And this is the way that I've tried to treat this, as some others have. in the old days, we used to build the airplane. We used to have to draw out a propeller governor and draw so many things and draw this and draw that. I don't think it's necessary for us to build the aircraft. The designers already did that. What we really need to do is evaluate the applicant's knowledge of how the pilot interfaces with what's available to them for normal operation and failures or abnormal operations. And along these lines, encourage the use of the schematics and the pictures that are already in a book that they carry on the airplane, instead of trying to draw an electrical system up there. We're not artists. It takes a while, especially for the instructors, to draw these things. And I have always used the picture that's actually in the book and said, explain this electrical system to me, and start where they want to start, usually hopefully with a battery, and go out from there. But the other things is, what I do is I basically have 5 things that I run by them, and I could do some of this in the oral portion and some of it actually out at the airplane, depending on what system I'm talking about. And it's, what is it? How is it powered or operated? How can it fail? What indication does the pilot have that it failed? And what can the pilot do about it? So I'm going to leave that screen up there for a couple seconds if anybody just wants to take a screenshot of that. But I found that this works really well. I don't want them to build it. I just want them to tell me basically those 5 things. And assuming that the answers are correct, we can move on to the next item. Any comments on this? Okay. Then some scenarios. I started with, I developed a bunch of these for some classes I was teaching out of flight school a few years ago, and different phases of flight to kind of break up the robotic stuff that we tend to see and teach all the time. So here's one on traffic patterns, just some different scenarios. Try arriving to an airport from different directions. We have a tendency at, obviously it's gonna, you're not gonna be able to do that at towered airport a lot, but some of the airports that are not towered, for us around here, Akchin Airport, come at it from 4 different directions and see how well they understand how to enter a traffic pattern. But there's some things there, high final approach resulting in a slip, create some distractions, go around without saying the word go around. Hey, there's a truck on the runway, or there's a guy riding his bike across the runway. Something other than the actual word go around. Loss of clearances, wave turbulence. Determining direction of pattern from a chart supplement or a sectional, simulate ATC calls. So once again, if anybody would like to contribute each time we do these, I'd like to try to get some input in different scenarios that you like to use or you want to see or want some information on, as well as the best practices.
Bill, can I jump in real quick?
Of course you can.
Well, thank you. I've probably shared this in this meeting before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. As an industry, as the flight training industry, any flight instructors who are watching this, and even us as DPs, we need to do a better job. We've got to stop using a slip to fix a bad approach. And it's just, it's taken the airlines 15 years to finally get the message. And I think we're getting pretty good at the airline level. But in GA, we still have way too many pilots that are high and fast on final, and they're using the slip to fix it. The scenarios that I use on check rides, and we talk about this on the ground before we even get to the airplane, we talk about the aerodynamics of slips, and we talk about it's a great tool in your toolbox, but all of my scenarios with slips are abnormal procedures. There's an emergency, there's some reason that a go around is not the safe option, either because you're simulated on fire or simulated passenger having a medical issue, some reason that we're doing that slip when we actually get out in the airplane, on the private pilot check ride and do the slip that's required. And I just think that as DPs, we can, we're not teaching in the check ride, we're not teaching during the check ride, but the way we present that scenario speaks volumes about why are we slipping. It's not just, oh, you're high and fast on final, show me a slip. No, sir, I'm going to go around when I'm high and fast on final. That's what I would hope they would say, but
Right.
instructors aren't doing that enough. So,
Well, that goes along with the stabilized approach concept,
yeah,
which
totally.
used to be, well, still is in Advisory Circular 6198. But as you'll see near the end of this, they finally put it in the Airplane Flying Handbook, all by itself. And along those lines is the things that we're still doing that are negating that are the addition of flaps after we break out on approach for the landing. We're changing the configuration of the airplane below 500 feet or 1,000 feet, whatever the situation is, VFR, IFR. We are, as you said, just relying on a slip to fix a problem. And you know what, if you're on fire or low on fuel or something, these things happen. But we need to get away from the dive and drives that we've done for years in the instrument check rides, where it's still, I see that going on still a little bit, and that goes obviously against the stabilized approach concept. And even with the plates that they have now, they published, descent angles that you can figure out a decent, rate of descent that's going to keep you close and not doing that. And I agree with you, Jim. That's we need to get them to think more about that, unless you put them in the situation on purpose because you need to see the slip.
Yeah. Yeah, and they understand that by the time it's happening. A related one, if we have any air traffic control people watching this, something that I used to do, heck, I probably even used to teach it, is S turns on final for spacing. And I think it was Max Truscott did a great, one of his podcasts a year or two ago. S turns on final are found nowhere in any official FAA documentation. And depending on the altitude you're doing it at, it's the opposite of a stabilized approach, if you think about it. And I've recently heard, even at the airline, on frequency, tower approving an airliner, S turns south, of course, approved if needed. It's like these guys don't, the tower controllers don't even understand that is the opposite of a stabilized approach.
Mm-hmm.
So we just got to be careful what scenarios we're using.
Exactly. Any other comments regarding these scenarios or this one? The next time we meet, I'll have one for takeoff, some different scenarios for some anomalies on takeoff. As I said before, here's another picture of the Airplane Flying Handbook. The FAA is being better now about actually listing the revisions at the beginning of their handbooks. You used to have to try to find them on your own. But now they've revised quite a few things in the Airplane Flying Handbook. Some were corrections to errors, but some were also some big changes we made, the forward slip to a landing being one of them. So anyway, make sure as these come out that you take a look at the front end and see what kind of things would apply to you in your travels there as an examiner and an instructor. So Jared, are you out there? Nope. Kim? Nope. Bill? Nope. I can't even contact the point of contacts. Jim, go for it.
I'm here. Don't have much to report other than operations seem to have slowed down quite a bit at Deer Valley with Westwind moving out to Goodyear. United Aviate is their name now. Still a little bit happening with their operation at Deer Valley, but not much.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there is construction on the ramp on the, so where Westwind used to park, they're doing some construction there. It's fenced off. So use caution taxiing on the ramp. Our understanding and expectation is that Cutter Aviation's turning that into a corporate jet area.
Okay. Todd, are you out there? Nope, I know Brian's not, but he didn't have anything to report from Falcon or the West Valley. So no point of contact reports other than what Jim just gave us. Larry Taylor, who stopped being a DP a little while back, wanted me to mention to the group that he has a whole bunch of temporary certificate books and notice of disapproval books. If anybody wants them, let him know or let me know. He was either just going to shred them or burn them or whatever. But Craig had mentioned to him about asking the group out there if anybody wanted any of the paper ones that you may find yourself using once in a while, just let me know or let Larry know.
Hey, Phil, Steve here. How you doing?
Hello, Steve here.
Hope everyone's doing well. Hey, regarding Tucson, they're already deep into their construction on 1-1 right. That's going to be a long-term project, probably well over a year, even upwards of 2 years. So not only for test purposes, but any type of aviation going on down there, just recommend that everyone keep an extra heads out if you're going into Tucson. And just check the NOTAMs for any taxiway closures, runway closures, etc.
Okay, thanks. Look at something here. Okay, any issues or problems that anybody wants to talk about or bring up? I'll have the questions available to everybody here in a few minutes, but any issues or problems that anybody wants to discuss?
Just a couple things about IACRA. We all know IACRA is wonderful. It makes our work simpler. In the past several months, there have been a couple unusual things that happen. For example, when renewing a CFI, the temporary certificate, the new expiration date was incorrect. So a quick call to Airman Cert, and they said, oh, that's no problem, easy fix. Just do on the temp cert, just do a corrected IACRA, cross out the incorrect date, write in the new one. And they said they usually don't even get to our activities until about 5 days after we close them. So if you notice it right away and do the correction, you can add it as a PDF to IACRA, and they will see that. They will see the corrected IACRA, and they'll use, and you could also make a remark like temporary certificate has incorrect expiration, corrected IACRA has the correct expiration date. Just something simple like that. And it works out really well. It happened to me. Another thing, it was a helicopter guy doing an add-on test for airplane. And this guy came from the Army route, so he was a Black Hawk driver. The temporary certificate deleted his S70 type rating. So again, a quick call to Airman Cert, just do the temporary or do the corrected IACRA, and that fixed it really quick. No problem. Airman Cert said they do not talk to the IACRA people, so they don't know what the situation is when that happens. And the help desk is really not for that. The help desk is more for like password problems, things like that. And then what was it? There was a couple other things. One of them was about the end of every month, I look back over my activities just to see what the disposition of some of the files are, just to see, make sure everything's good. I noticed a couple return for corrections. So again, a quick call to Airman Cert. They said, no, nothing's wrong with it. The certificate's been issued. So the only recommendation is just an extra lookout on the paperwork that IACRA generates. Again, it usually works great, but little glitches can happen. So just to save some potential grief in the future, maybe an extra look over.
Thanks. Anyone else? Anything with procedures? Any procedures that we know of that have changed, maybe along the instrument realm? Nothing. Anything with airspace or airports? I don't know of anything with the FA publications. Anything on the professional side? Any feedback from the schools or instructors? Nothing, okay. And we don't have any mentoring going on right now that I know of. And committee reports, since there really aren't any committees, and if there was, it'd be me anyway. How about AFTW, Jim?
We had a good meeting today. I think record attendance, and that was recorded. We'll get that up on YouTube later tonight for anyone who wants to watch the meeting. The main new thing was version 11 of the practice area reporting point overlays are now on the website. Just go to aftw.org, click on practice areas, and all the links are there for different KML files, depending how you want to do it. The videos there do include instructions on how to remove your old overlays. So enjoy.
Okay. Is there anyone here from the POG? or ASAG? Nope.
Phil Terry
Yeah.
Grant here from.
Oh, there you are. There you are.
Yeah. We had an executive meeting last night to determine whether we're going to have our banquet in person. And with the rising COVID numbers and the mandate at ASU for the mask mandates, we didn't see a viable way to have our in-person banquet. We are still going to have it virtually on the 29th. So there will be a Zoom link for that. There'll still be wings, credit, and spans. We'll still have our guest speaker, Rich Lee, who was involved with Super Bowl 30 and picking up Diana Ross at the 50-yard line down at ASU Stadium when that was the event back there almost over 20 years ago now. And we're still looking for silent auction items that anything can donate. If you still want to purchase a dinner, which you can eat at home, you know, your dinner fee will be a donation to ASAG, and of course our ASAG funds go to supporting AFTW's website and ASAG's website and any safety initiatives that we come up with. Now, again, virtually on the 29th, and I think we'll probably start at 7 o'clock and run for about an hour to an hour and 15. We're still going to hand out all the general aviation awards. So we had nominations, I believe, for every award except for Airport of the Year. So that's the latest. And Jim Pittman had a good chart that he brought up there on how COVID is spiking. And we just think with the share of our audience that comes to participate, rather than increase their anxiety and everything else, it's best to just go virtual again and hope for the best next year.
Okay. Thanks, Harry. Craig, fast team?
Hey, Phil. Yeah, you know, I've got one little thing. It's kind of more like a public service maintenance announcement. You mind if I share my screen just for a couple of seconds?
Please do. Let's see, do I have to do something to get you to share it?
Yeah, it says that you have sharing disabled.
Okay, so let me see how I fix that. Jim? How do I fix that?
Need to unshare first.
Yeah, if you just stop sharing, I think that might do it.
Okay. Stop share.
All right, let me give this a shot.
If that
No,
doesn't work.
it says it's still disabled.
So on the participants list, hover over Craig, and under more, there's probably an option,
Okay,
but I don't know because I'm just a participant, so I can't see that.
well, let's see what we got here.
And if this doesn't work, I'll just read it to you.
Now we'll get it figured out here. So there we go. Okay, more. Make host remain, put in waiting room, remove report, allow. Let's see. Well, allow to record local files, chat, and make host. Will that work?
Try it.
Okay.
I think screen sharing is under security. So maybe at the bottom of the screen, you can click security.
Security, okay. Cancel.
Allow share screen.
Security, okay. Waiting room, share screen, chat. Unmute themselves, start.
Allow share
video.
screen.
What's that?
Allow sharing of screen just under security. Oh yeah, I think now
Allow
he's
participants to share screen.
yeah, I think
Okay.
you can share already. Yeah.
Okay. I
Thank
did
you.
that now.
That one's news
Yeah.
to me.
Hey, there we go.
This meeting is so educational.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hopefully you're seeing that. This was sent out by our SLT, and basically the instructions to us, Ernie, myself, and other FAST team program managers is the purple part at the top where they wanted us to share it with FAST team reps to include the safety information in future seminars and webinars. So what they're wanting to share is this safety recommendation 21-113, and that's the part that's in the black. You can read it yourself. Basically, there's a company that was in Arkansas that has done some faulty propeller, constant speed propeller work. And so just to make people aware that if they have had that part from that company on their airplane, to probably have it looked at. So and it's a safety recommendation. So I mean, apparently it doesn't meet whatever thresholds required for a AD or an SAIB, or I don't know why it's coming out this way, but I'm doing my part, sharing it with y'all. And if you'd like a copy, I mean, you can make a screenshot of it, or all the fast reps should have a copy of this. So, so there it is in a nutshell.
Okay, thanks, Craig. And while I got, yeah, go ahead. Someone else?
Craig and Ernie, may we share this on social media?
I'm sorry?
Is it okay to share this on social media, Craig and Ernie?
I'm sure it's just fine. And I think that they've probably shared it on the FAA or the FASTing website.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna pull it down.
All right, bye-bye. Let's see if I can get myself back here. There we go. Am I back up there?
Well, I see your wallpaper.
Yeah, I'm working on it here. It's not, there we go. Okay. We're coming near the end here anyway. So are there any questions or comments from the DPEs?
Yeah, this is Karen. I'm the one with my hand raised here. I just want to make a quick note that an early heads up. It's scheduled for May this year is going to be a change in our airport diagrams. I'm on the FAA Surface Safety Group, and there's going to be a change in the airport diagrams and an additional area in the chart supplement also. And it relates to, in the chart supplement, trying to create more awareness and alerts to larger airports that have had issues with wrong surface landings. You're probably aware of that Alaskan Airlines issue where it literally came within, they're estimating 14 feet of hitting another aircraft when the jet lined up on a taxiway instead of a runway.
In Air Canada there in San Francisco.
It was a couple of years ago. It's hard. Sorry, I don't remember all the details. But if
Air
you're
Canada
interested,
319 lined up on the taxiway in San Francisco and came within 13 feet of hitting another aircraft.
yeah, there was actually a whole line of filled jets waiting to take off. So it would have been like the worst disaster ever. And there's been other wrong surface landings, obviously. So that really created an alert. If you're interested, NAFI, I'm the new chair as of this year. NAFI puts out a monthly live broadcast called Mentor Live every third Wednesday. And we'll have the FAA, we're hosting 2 FAA representatives that will be presenting this in March.
Karen, this is your first time here. Let everybody know your qualifications.
Oh, actually, well, thank you very much. I'm coming to you from single digit Wisconsin, so I'm really appreciating the sunny skies I see in your background. Well, I mentioned I'm the new chair of NAFI, National Association of Flight Instructors. I'm a DPE, but still pretty new. I just did my first recurrent training this month, which raised a lot of other issues in my mind about the need for us DPEs to communicate more with each other, just the way your group's so effectively doing. I'm also an ATP and pretty active, master flight instructor with all those initials. So that's about it. Also, I recognize at least Mike Jesh in this group because Mike comes to AirVenture every year and is one of our Pilot Proficiency Center CFIs. They tossed me up in the kind of organizing management group of that since I'm only an hour north of Oshkosh. I'm really involved in EA matters.
Hey, thanks, Karen.
That's it. And again, thanks for letting me attend this meeting. It's really phenomenal.
No problem.
Welcome, Karen. Thanks for joining in.
Yep. Any questions or comments from our guests?
One thing I'd like to announce, Deer Valley Airport, it was an action item at the runway safety meeting, the last one. I asked if they could put the link to the airport website in the chart supplement. And I'm glad to see that the January 27th issue has a link to the FAA's From the Flight Deck video. I think they're still working on their website because of the construction. They need new videos of their own. But I think it's a great step. And Karen, I hope you'll help promote that idea. Everyone, thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, I certainly will. And by the way, the goal of all those From the Flight Deck videos is really to have them for all of the 520 airports, public airports in the NAS. So they keep adding more and more, and they really are a good flight planning tool. And hopefully the CFIs are really incorporating that also.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay,
Announcement for a couple events.
I'm sorry?
An announcement for a couple of events.
Yeah,
coming.
sure.
All right, in chat, you'll see links to 2 spans notices for events that are happening on this Friday, the 14th, and also on the 28th. On the 14th, we're going to look at how to get out of Las Vegas on a clear night, which is challenging when you don't have access to Bravo airspace, surrounded by terrain you can't see, and lots of hot restricted airspace. That was inspired by a CFIT incident that occurred 14 years ago. Every participant gets to play pilot in command and make aeronautical decisions about how to accomplish that safely. And then on the 28th, we're going to look at the San Diego incident involving the Learjet, the details of which are pretty much well known. I just got a tweet from NTSB that the preliminary report is available. And I was looking at it here in the last few minutes, and it does not tell us anything we don't already know from listening to liveatc.net and also FlightAware. Preliminary reports are intended to really throw the media a bone and then make them go away. So NTSB is not pestered over the next 2 years. But nothing new there. We're going to look at what it takes to get into Gillespie under the types of sky conditions that were present at the time. There is a way to do it, which is interesting when you consider all of what is not available on the published instrument approach procedures. So again, it's a flight planning scenario where every participant gets to put themselves into that position and make decisions about how to make that happen. So these will make for interesting discussions, and I like to use these incidents as teaching points because there's always much to be learned from the decision-making of others that did not work out. So thank you for that announcement, and hope you can all attend.
Thank you. Any FSDO gentlemen have anything else for us?
Nothing here, Phil.
Okay. Well, thanks for attending, everybody. Our next meeting will be February 8th of 2022. That's the second Tuesday once again. A couple of ways you can get some information to me is at my Gmail right there. We also have a DPEAG email address right there as well. So once again, I encourage as much input as possible from the group, both examiners, instructors, flight schools, anything at all. If you want anything de-identified, that's not a problem. If you want some things brought up and may not want exact source attached to it, that's fine. And I'll bring up, whatever. That's what this whole thing is about, is to try to get everybody pretty much on the same page. So it's not a big surprise when someone walks in for a check ride and runs across something that they weren't expecting, and vice versa. So once again, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Phil. Great job.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.